My name is Luke Vale. I'm the co-director of a research design service in the North East and also a member of a number of NIHR funding panels. In this role, I'm in a fairly unique situation in the fact that I get to see quite a number of grant proposals. I get to see what was good about them and get to see what was bad about them. Looking across all these applications that I see, there's a number of key points that come out that can help guide the preparation of a grant proposal by applicants. One of the first areas where an application might struggle is whether or not it's provided a clear statement of the importance of the work. And what I mean by that is, how large is the problem that is going to be addressed? How much does it cost to the NHS and society? Then moving on from that, we want to think about, well, if it's an intervention study, how might that intervention make a difference to all this? How might it improve costs? How might it improve health? And we need to provide evidence for all of that to justify what you put in the application form. Second thing to think about is the aims and objectives. It's surprising when reading grant applications how many people actually fail to make their aims and objectives clear and unambiguous. And they truly need to be. If you can't tell the panel what you're trying to do and how you're going to do it, then they're not likely to fund you. Another point that needs to be considered when preparing a grant application is how you've defined both the intervention and control. Applicants are normally really good at actually defining their new intervention. What's less good perhaps is actually the definition of the control intervention. What is it? How is it going to be delivered? Who delivers it? Anything that's unclear or uncertain is going to be focused upon by a funding panel. The next sort of issue to think about is outcomes. There's a tendency to use a whole host of different outcomes, a battery of outcomes. And this leads to the concern that, are they all necessary and are you going to overburden participants in the study? As a grant applicant myself, but also as a panel member, I always have to ask the question, are all these measures really necessary? Another key feature of a grant proposal is the sample size. Now, when we are talking about and producing a grant, a sample size calculation, there's a whole set of information and numbers that are used to generate that sample size. One of those might be the effect size, others might be what the baseline rate is. All of these numbers have to be credible and they have to be evidenced. Another piece of information that's needed for a sample size calculation is what the dropout and withdrawal rate is. Again, this needs to be evidenced and justified. The statisticians on the panel are going to attempt to replicate it during the panel meeting, and if they can't replicate it, they are going to say so in no uncertain terms. A sample size calculation has to be reproducible. Moving on from sample size, once we know what that sample size is, we now have to think about how we're going to recruit enough people to get into the study. Now, one of the concerns when we think about large multi-centre studies is that people often draw upon a small external pilot. However, such information is rarely sufficient on its own. What I'd be looking for is real, accurate information from all the collaborating centres about the numbers of patients they might contribute. Is there a clear description about how you intend to recruit to time and target? Now, one of the most vexing issues when preparing a grant application is about the cost of that grant application. It's reassuring to note that the panel will expect resources to be in for some of the key components. They'll expect resources to be included for clinical trials units, statistics, health economists, and other methodologists. What they will do, because they're very experienced, is they'll look for things that are out of the normal, and they'll question those. Better to save effort here and make sure that no costs included are for things that are going to be out of scope for that particular funder. Are costs too low? Are they too high? The panel's also going to look at value for money. This is quite a difficult one to judge. Value for money, I guess, can only really be assessed by looking about what the panel has judged in the past. So actually try and benchmark your application about other studies that have previously been funded in the recent past. Now, in a grant proposal, when you're preparing a grant proposal, it's almost certain at some point you're going to get peer reviewer comments. You need to look through these and look at what's the most substantive comments and treat them professionally, even when the referee, which is occasionally the case, has not been professional in themselves. You want to focus on the most substantive comments, as I've said, and spend comparatively less time on the less substantive comments, those that are irrelevant. Trust the panel to be able to draw out the substantive comments, and they will judge whether or not you've been able to address them satisfactorily. The panel itself is also likely to provide comments. They're there aiming to help you make a better application. You need to have a really strong justification not to follow those comments, not to address those comments. Basically, you ignore them at your peril. Turning to the summary and abstract, these are the parts of the application form that it's absolutely certain everybody will read. It's worth spending time trying to get them right. If you don't, or there's uncertainties there, you're almost starting off on the back foot with the funding panel and referees. They go into the process of looking at your whole application with a negative view.